Hello everyone and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I work within the knowledge and practice area of the organisation. I've been with RICS now for over 12 years and my role is to look at the effect of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 qualified members working worldwide, it really is a huge broad canvas upon which data and tech is having a really profound and valuable effect. And indeed, our members work across all the different asset types: land, residential, commercial, infrastructure, alternative assets. And because they work across that full life cycle from land through planning and development, construction, brokerage, finance, building surveying, asset management, it really is an incredibly broad spectrum that this huge wave of innovation is taking place. And I'm really glad to have Phanos joining me from 2050 Materials this morning. So welcome to the discussion, Phanos.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Nice to be here. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Now, before we get into the bits and bytes, it's always nice to get a bit of a backstory. So it'd be great to hear about your background and perhaps the origin story of 2050 Materials.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as you said, my name is Phanos. I'm one of the co-founders of 2050 Materials. I actually come from an engineering background in my studies, although I've always had a bit of a fascination with modeling and data specifically. So I sort of focused on environmental engineering and the data that goes alongside that. So obviously the carbon footprints and all of those kind of metrics that the industry is talking about a lot. But I have worked actually for a few years before working directly in the construction sector. I was working more closely to real estate investors. And in my previous job, we were essentially gathering all kinds of climate information and turning it into, I would say, investor related metrics so that they could assess the risks and opportunities of their real estate portfolios primarily. So essentially, similar to the work that we do today, as I'll explain, but essentially getting a lot of unstructured data and structuring it in a format that it becomes a decision-making tool rather than just sort of a random data point. And maybe the backstory, maybe the backstory of kind of how 2050 Materials got started, at least as an idea. Essentially, in my last job, working alongside some of the largest real estate investors, I started hearing a lot of mentions of scope 3 emissions. So basically everything that relates to the supply chains of buildings and more specifically to the materials that go into the buildings. And yeah, coming from a background, also a family background of architects and people working with building materials, I sort of quickly knew that there's a gap in the data and the tools that are available in the real industry to deliver on these top-down targets by the investors.
Indeed. So in a brief summary, what's 2050 Materials doing and what's the problem it's solving?
Yeah, so 2050 Materials is a data company more than it is a software company. I think that's an important distinction often when we introduce our organization. What we do is that we are building and continuously building a large data set of sustainability data around construction products and materials. And then we offer and disseminate that sort of data through an API primarily to all kinds of stakeholders in the construction industry. So essentially what we are doing is we are tackling the construction industry's gap in sustainability by providing the data component.
Now, you've just made a big sort of differential there, an important thing about almost saying, well, you know, you're not a software house, you're more about data. You know, why is that, and why is the data so important to this sustainability issue across construction?
Yeah, it's a very important question. So our perception, I would say, is there's been a huge amount of innovation in the construction industry, especially around BIM and digital technologies and all kinds of tools that help us be more efficient. So we sit in a position where the industry is actually very powerful in terms of the modeling and the software capabilities that exist. However, what has lagged behind is the actual evolution of the data value chain. So when I say data value chain, I mean the ability to have structured data that can feed into all of our cost estimation software and BIM modeling tools and BIM libraries and other carbon tools. So there's all of this very powerful work and software that has been created throughout the years. But what we saw as really lagging, and the reason we focused exclusively on the data side of things, is the structured data set and a company or an organization really focusing on not just providing the raw data, but really trying to derive insights from it, because it has happened in a bunch of other industries like the healthcare industry and like of course in the on the internet and the kind of digital industry, but it still has not really evolved or matured in the construction sector.
And I suppose an obvious question to follow on from that, Phanos, is: are you finding the sector, the construction sector, now being more receptive to these kind of tech and data solutions that are going to address these climate and sustainability issues? Because obviously, it's very much in the fore in the public agenda, but clearly the sector needs to embrace this and use the data to make things better.
It's also a very good question, and honestly, not one that has a clear answer, I would say. There's definitely more and more of a push from the industry for sustainability and also the actual solutions. So I do think the discussion has moved away from theoretical discussions around sustainability and more into the practical implementation and looking for solutions that can actually help different companies, whether it's design companies or construction companies, to actually implement on the targets they've set. And you also see that in a way in how different new roles are defined in these companies. So I would say up to maybe 2-3 years ago, you would have a sustainability team which was kind of sitting in a silo and doing the special projects. And what we're starting to see now is that the sustainability leads within large organizations, they're working very closely with the leadership team. They're always in discussions with clients. They're always working very closely with digital and BIM teams or with cost estimating teams. So I do think the narrative is shifting in a way that says sustainability and carbon also specifically is no longer nice to have. It's actually a competitive advantage and it's a necessity for businesses to consider. Yeah, having said that, I guess I would love to say I'm only optimistic and happy with how the industry is going. We are seeing slower than expected moves, let's say, from policymakers. So different kinds of countries have set targets, but are either not directly following up with them because of, for example, the economy or any other reason that comes up. So there is a bit of a slowdown from the policymakers, but interestingly enough, the industry and the private sector is actually pushing a lot, even in light of a slowdown of policies. So that's, I think, really positive news.
Indeed, indeed. And I guess from your perspective, having built this platform, how are you kind of differentiating and set it apart from other data providers? Because clearly there's a lot of people now providing data in some form or other to the sector. How do you kind of fit in within that overall landscape, and what's making your data set different from perhaps other sets that are available out there?
Yeah, so there's basically two things really that we differentiate ourselves on. So the first and probably the most important with the state of the industry today is the usability and the, let's say, how understandable the data is. So I mentioned earlier we're a data company and not a software company, and we do have a platform out there where you can create a free account and look at a lot of the data that we provide. Our platform is essentially just a facade to showcase a lot of the data that we have, which we are already integrating in a bunch of other processes. So we've put a lot of effort on our platform to show that sustainability does not need to be something that you require a PhD in order to understand. We think that these kind of data points should be basic knowledge of anyone working in the built environment. And I think our platform exactly reflects that view. So it's simple to understand, even though it's still accurate and scientifically correct, but it's understandable, and what we like to say, it's democratized essentially for the industry. So number one differentiating factor is definitely the simplicity and usability of our data. The second factor, which is starting to become a lot more important as we're starting to integrate our data within some of the leading organizations, is we have a lot of in-house capabilities around machine learning and artificial intelligence, which when you start collecting a lot of data, these kind of capabilities really start opening doors. So we're working on a lot of exciting new projects where a lot of manual processes that happen in our industry, for good or for bad, are starting to have the possibility to be automated, or at least we can cut down the time by sometimes 90 to 95%. So really the use of machine learning and AI is really something that I would say puts us apart from other data providers.
Indeed, and I suppose that leads almost to another kind of question around, by using those kind of technologies, is that how you make sure that your data is accurate and up to date? Because one of the challenges with data, even if it's available in a digital form, is one gets the illusion that it's correct and up to date, and obviously recency and accuracy is incredibly important. So how do you address that, and how does technology help you address that issue of the quality of the data set?
We definitely use a lot of machine learning and AI to enhance the quality aspect of our data. It's not just that. So what we use is essentially a combination of what I would call kind of normal software approaches and algorithms that have existed, but we are using some of the newer technologies to really enable better quality checks. When we talk about quality, however, it's important to understand that because the data value chain is not mature in the industry, quality is generally not the best. I would say there are gaps in data. There are data points out there which are of lower quality compared to others. However, the industry today uses almost any data point they can get their hands on without necessarily being able to assess the quality. So what our house view, if you like, around quality is that we use transparency as a fix to the quality assurance. So what I mean by that is there's a data point that indicates, let's say, the carbon footprint of a brick. So the important thing is to know, where does this carbon footprint come from? What kind of document is it, and what kind of standard that adhere to know things like, has it been third-party verified, or is it an internal assessment that a manufacturer has done? So having access to all of that kind of information allows each stakeholder that's using the data to make their own decision about what is good enough and not good enough. So it's important to just make the distinction of, unfortunately, it's still not binary, so we cannot say this is good and this is bad. But what we do is we ensure that everything has traceability in a format that, as a user of the data and as someone who consumes the data, you can always filter out what your own definition of bad data is.
No, I think that's a really key point, because I mean, across the whole sector, data is available, but of varying quality, as you say, and that kind of provenance, as I call it, that traceability of how was it collected, how old is it, what was the source, it does allow people to make those kind of value judgments themselves, because there isn't necessarily a kind of an ISO standard for quality data in the sector. It is difficult, isn't it? So in terms of the people who have adopted this, who are your main customers, and what sort of kind of benefits are they seeing from using the data that you can make available to them?
So our main customers are primarily digital teams within architecture and engineering offices. So we work with very large architecture offices, but we also work with very large, I would say, either consulting firms or sometimes also contractors. So the key stakeholder that usually really pushes to get access to our data is someone who is leading the data strategy within these large organizations. And again, the reason is both because they can offload a lot of the work that is happening today manually in an Excel file, unfortunately, still in these sort of companies, to an organization like us who really take care to structure the data well, to have quality assurance processes in place to make sure the data is up to date, but also looking kind of ahead in the future. They want to have an organization that can be a data partner with them to help them integrate new technologies, new approaches that are coming into the market. So I would say large AEC firms, as a general statement, and their digital teams are our main customers. We are starting increasingly to work with software providers as well. So some of the companies that are already providing, vertical specific software in the industry, and they are starting to introduce sustainability components to their solutions. They're often in touch with us to help them essentially roll those out.
Indeed. And I guess it's a question I should probably ask more, but who isn't using your products that should be? because we often talk about the people who've adopted and all the great stories, but it's also interesting to kind of turn the question around and say, well, who out there really should be using this and hasn't really kind of woken up to it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I wouldn't say they're not using it completely, but it's a stakeholder that we see a huge potential in starting to use our data, and that's quantity surveyors. So quantity surveyors have been estimating costs and tracking budgets, and what is happening in the industry from what we see is that the new budget is essentially a carbon budget. So this stakeholder in the industry has a huge potential to suddenly track carbon alongside their cost estimates, which on the one hand, of course, increases their own service offering to their clients, which is always good. But on the other hand, it lets them also balance carbon with cost. So if you're going for something that achieves a lower like stays within the monetary budget but exceeds a carbon budget, then you can sort of do those trade-off decisions during the cost estimation exercise. So definitely there's a huge potential for QSs to both register on our platform, but also we're rolling out some new products which are QS specific, but we're still based on our data set essentially.
Indeed, indeed. And often when I talk to tech partners, they get a huge value from kind of partnerships and collaborations with other actors in the kind of in the built environment. Do you have any of those? And if so, what sort of collaborations or partnerships are you most excited about in terms of the value they can generate both for you and for the sector more broadly?
Yeah, we definitely have different kinds of partnerships which help us a lot, both in developing our solution, but also in testing in a way what you can do with the data that we have, because we are cognizant that we're not aware of everything that can be done with our data. So it's always an exciting opportunity when someone comes up to us with a new idea. One really exciting partnership we announced recently is with Mott MacDonald. So they're using essentially the API of the data that we have to power their carbon portal. So this portal called Moata. And what they're offering is an infrastructure-focused carbon tool. And we've partnered with them to provide the data, but also, again, going forward, the new kind of technologies that will come into play that can introduce automations and faster calculations or anything that would help their own user groups. So that's one really exciting partnership. We have a few more, which I cannot really share yet, but I would say they're in a similar kind of domain. So large companies really launching what I think is quite innovative services or tools, and they essentially are offloading the data aspect to us.
And in terms of your future, your roadmap, your sort of new product development, so what sort of things can you share with us that you're particularly excited about that's going to enhance what you're already doing, or perhaps increase the functionality of the data that's available?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the last couple of years, what we've put a lot of effort on is figuring out a data format that really works so that we can continuously keep expanding the data. And we're at a very nice position now where we've automated this expansion. So anytime there's a new EPD, for example, from a manufacturer, it takes a few days really for it to land in our database. So that gives us access to essentially something like 99% of all sustainability data that relates to construction products. And it also frees up our own time to work on these new projects. What I'm mostly excited about is using AI to enhance what I would call sustainability education and guidance within organizations. So unfortunately, what you see now, even in a large organization that usually has quite a few resources, is that you have a sustainability lead or a sustainability consultant who gets a flood of questions by all kinds of stakeholders that from a data decision point of view are relatively simple. So a lot of what we're working on now is using all of the structured data that we've put together, as well as some of these new technologies that have come out with large language models, to try to replicate something that automates the health and the educational aspect that a lot of companies need. So that's something that we're really excited about. Another thing which we're piloting with, again, in this topic of kind of cost estimates, potentially providing carbon estimates, is some really powerful automation capabilities. So something that generally in the process of carbon assessments and life cycle assessments, there is one part of the process which is very, very slow, which is selecting materials. And again, because we have a large data set, we're starting to be able to provide some level of automation and help to these kind of assessors that really speeds up the process and hopefully also scales carbon estimates in our industry, because they're super crucial.
And if you put your kind of your sort of future hat on, looking sort of perhaps beyond that kind of initial roadmap, what's your vision about what 2050 can deliver perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years, and how perhaps you also fit within what is still quite a kind of complicated ecosystem of data providers and software solutions, and then the end customers, and then their project sponsors, because it is a complex sector, all the way across the life cycle. So how do you see 2050 developing and fitting in within that?
So our vision on a I would say more broad perspective is to see a construction sector that operates in harmony with the planet. So something that is, of course, providing new housing and offices and all of the infrastructure that we need, but does it in a format that climate impacts are really considered. And you're very right, Andrew, it's a very complicated sector, and it's also a very fragmented sector. Our view of the world is that we don't think there's going to be a single software provider that's going to have a silver bullet solution to be able to do all of the sustainability processes. What we see the sector moving towards is that people will get a lot more comfortable in utilizing and using data within different kinds of processes, and the data is going to be core. Data-driven decisions is going to be a core process of design and construction. So within that, as 2050, we see ourselves a little bit like the data provider and the provider of different functionalities related again only to the data, so that eventually an architect can plug into our data in a format that really makes sense for an architect, and a contractor can do the same for the sake of a contractor. So it's really about providing an open canvas, if you like, where you go in and you get the data that you need for your own processes, and you build the processes that make sense for your own organization. So that's kind of where we see ourselves.
And I guess, if people listening and viewing want to get involved, I guess you're in a kind of a quite a subtle position where you're not only providing data to different parts of the sector, but you're also in receipt of data from other people who've got data as well. So how do people work with you and get involved, where they may well be a data provider or indeed a data consumer in some way?
So people can get involved. Generally, I would say the first thing would be to go register on our platform. It's a free platform. You can create an account in a couple of seconds, and it's at app.2050-materials.com. So when they go on our platform, they'll see a sample of the data that we provide to different organizations through our API products or through different kinds of solutions. But it's the best way to get acquainted with the type of work that we're doing, because you'll be able to see not just the raw data, but just some of the functionality as well of what we can do with the data. And we think that it's a nice starting point as well for a lot of people to get into this kind of topic and data without being overwhelmed or I would say scared off because of the complexity of the information. So number one is go register on the platform and play around and start getting a feeling of the work that we're doing. After that, anyone who wants to integrate data within their processes, whether it's a digital lead or a BIM lead or a cost estimation team, you can just click the contact button basically either on our website or on our platform, and we can help anyone from large companies to small organizations to integrate this kind of data within their processes in, I would say, a couple of weeks is a pretty realistic timeline we've seen with existing clients.
And in terms of people that you want to get data from, I presume you're reasonably flexible in terms of the format of that data, because you're using obviously technology to turn what might be a PDF or some kind of unstructured piece of data into something more structured. So I guess from that point of view, you're trying to make sure the barriers for them as providers of data are fairly low.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a good mention as well. So when we talk about data providers from a manufacturer's perspective, we have, of course, the possibility to onboard data that might not be in data sources we're reading in right now. So if there's any manufacturers who would listen to this, we would be more than happy to, of course, onboard data. And as you say, it's quite an easy process for us because of the technology use. there are also other data providers. So it might be, let's say, aggregators of data or anyone else who might have a benefit as well in having that kind of data displayed on our platform. So all of that is partnerships and friend organizations, I would say, which we want to have alongside us. So of course, please, feel free to reach out for that purpose as well.
Indeed, indeed. Well, it's been fascinating to chat, Phanos, and obviously it's a huge important area for us as an organisation, looking at how we can really help the sector, really deliver on the net zero agenda and that the whole sustainability piece. And as you say, start thinking about cost not only in monetary terms, but in carbon terms and sustainability terms from day one, really looking at the design and construction process. But for today, thanks ever much for your time. Fascinating to talk, and look forward to catching up again soon, Phanos.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. It was a really nice chat.